Today I'm going to show you how to do Russian spiral. Now I have had several requests to do basic stitches, spirals and peyote and things like that, especially spirals. Now I went ahead and did a few of the basic stitches so far, but like I did in those videos and like I'm going to do today, I'm trying not to do exactly the same thing that there is on YouTube a billion times. So I'm trying to change each basic stitch a little bit into something just a little bit different, either by the beads I use or the way I use them, the way I embellish them, changing up sizes, things like that. So that's what I'm doing with the Russian spiral today. I'm making a sparkling Russian spiral. So I'm going to use a crystal and 11 O's. And I'm going to use crystal in several different sizes and kind of graduate up and then graduate back down and then change the shape and graduate back down, change the shape. And so basically we're making this little bracelet in crystal and 11 O's. Now, if you want to learn Russian spiral from this video, you can use an 8-0 and 11-0 instead of the 11-0 and the rondelle I'm going to use. You can go up in size with the 6-0 here. You can make this all seed beads if you'd like. As I go up in size, I go from a 2x3 crystal rondelle to a 4mm bicone to a 4mm round. My main bead that I'm using is a 2x3 rondelle and 11-0 seed beads. Now you can change that up. You can use 11-0 seed beads, 8-0 seed beads instead of rondelles, and 6-0 seed beads instead of a 4mm or bicone. And then you can use the 6-0s here also. Or you can put a bicone here and do the rest in seed beads. It doesn't matter. You can change it up. The stitch is going to stay the same regardless. It just changes slightly when you change sizes. And the only way that changes slightly is as you change sizes. So I will show you how to do that. Anyway, this is what we're going to make today. And I'm going to show you what we need. What you will need for this project. And I will put exact numbers or at least close approximations in caption when I'm finished because I don't know exactly how much I'm going to use at the moment here. But we will start with a 4mm bicone. I'm using a Preciosa and it's kind of a variegated color. It has a couple of different little mystic type colors in it. And it's got blues and greens and kind of a silvery gray and a clear. I'm using that for my 4mm bicone, and you will need quite a few of them. Start with, probably 100, a couple hundred, just to make sure you have enough, just to have a bunch of them. Like I said, I'll put numbers, approximations in caption. And then we will need a 2x3 crystal rondelle. Now, like I said, you don't have to use crystal. You can use 6-0s and 8-0s. But if you're going to use the crystal like I'm going to do, this is a 2x3 crystal rondelle. And I'm using, I will need not quite 2 strands, but this is 2 strands worth. Now with the crystal rondelles, they come like this. I use these little Chinese crystal rondelles because they're absolutely pretty. They don't come in funny sizes. The edges aren't jagged. They're nice little crystals. And there's a couple of places people always complain that they can't find my crystal rondelles that I use. Beadcorp.com has them under their Thunder Polished Crystal, the 2x3 rondelle. You can get them there. ZNet Shows has them under 2x3 rondelle and their crystal section. And so does ChineseCrystal.com. You can get a big variety at ChineseCrystal.com, all kinds of colors, and they come in these long strands. However, it takes about 3 weeks to get your crystal from there. But those are 3 places that you can find them. Of course, if you want to use a Swarovski or whatever, a check fire polish 2x3, that's fine too. It doesn't matter. These are very pretty. I don't have any problem using them, so that's what I'm going to use. And you will need about 2 strands. We won't use all of this, but pretty close. Then an 11-0 seed bead. I am using a Toho galvanized silver 11-0 seed bead, and then some 4mm rounds. We won't use a whole lot of those, so you don't need as many as the other crystal. And then I'm going to use a little magnetic clasp today, this little rhinestone encrusted one. It's a really strong one, so I'm going to use it. If you're going to use a magnetic clasp, make sure you have an extremely strong one. This is a lightweight bracelet, so it should be able to handle it, but it still needs to be pretty strong so it doesn't flip off the wrist. And this one, I used a toggle, but I don't really like the way it looks, so I'm going to change it up in the video. Of course, you can use a toggle if you'd like. Then you will need a beading needle. I'm using a size 10 English beading needle. I've had a lot of questions about my needles lately. This is a John James English beading needle, size 10. Then you will need 8-pound fire line, or 6-pound if you'd like. I prefer 8-pound, and you need to start with a good length, probably 2 wingspans. And let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so we are going to begin by picking up 2 11-0 seed beads, a crystal rondelle, 2 11-0 seed beads, a crystal rondelle, 2 11-0 seed beads, and a crystal rondelle. So this is what you will have on your beading needle: 6 11-0s and 3 rondelles. You're going to bring this down to the end of your thread, and you're going to leave yourself a nice long tail, 12 to 18 inches. I like to leave a pretty long tail when I'm going to use it for my clasping. So somewhere around there. Of course, you can always extend it later if you'd like. And then we're just going to tie these into a knot. Just do a little overhand knot, making sure that the knot goes between the beads and not on top of them. Just like this. And this is what you should have. Just bring this in like this. Now I'm going to sew all the way around all of my beads again, just to make sure they're nice and secure. So just sew around every single bead on your thread. When you get all the way around to where your knot is, pass the knot. So you're here coming out of this rondelle. Pass the knot, that's where your knot is, and just go ahead and go through the next 2 11-0s. And go through the next rondelle and exit the 11-0 after it. So it doesn't matter what rondelle you're past. Just make sure you're coming out of the middle of the 2 11-0s anywhere on your little section here. I just like to be away from my tail to start. So here I am, exiting my little 11-0 here. I am going to pick up, to start my Russian spiral, I'm going to pick up my bigger bead. So if you're doing this with seed beads, these will be 8-0s and these will be 11-0s. And you will exit your 11-0s. Then you will pick up your bigger bead first. So you would pick up an 8-0 first. In my case, I'm picking up a rondelle. And then we will pick up 2 11-0 seed beads. We will go past our largest bead. So either our 8-0 or our rondelle. We will look for it. We'll go past it and into the 11-0 seed bead on the other side of the big bead. And pull. Make sure your tension is good. Turn your little piece like this and pick up the big bead first. So in my case, the rondelle, and then 2 11-0 seed beads. Look for your next big rondelle or 8-0 and go into the bead after it. So we're going to go into this little 11-0 here on the other side of our rondelle. Turn your piece again, and then pick up your big bead first, the rondelle, and then 2 11-0s. And then you're going to go past the next big bead in your base and go into the 11-0 and pull. And this is what you'll have. Looks like a little funny spirograph spiral. If you're old enough to remember what spirograph was. I'm aging myself. So now we're exiting this little 11-0 here after finishing our first row all the way around. So we are going to then pick up our crystal first, always the big bead first, and then 2 11-0 seed beads. Look for your biggest bead, pass over it, and pick up the next 11-0 right behind it. And pull. Get good tension. It'll kind of lay on top, and that's okay. And then we're coming out of this 11-0. We will pick up our big bead first, pick up the crystal, rondelle, and 2 11-0s. Find your next rondelle in line and go to the bead behind it, right here. Now this part can be rather confusing just because it looks really funny. It looks like a big blob at this point. So pull your stuff together here and then pick up a crystal rondelle. Oops, sorry about that. So it looks kind of like a big blob. So I'm coming out of this seed bead here. Pick up your crystal rondelle and 2 11-0 seed beads. Find your next big bead and go into the seed bead behind it. Now at this point you can kind of cuff it up into a little spiral like this, into a little cup. Now every time you're ready to make your next round, you will see that you'll have 3 little 11-0s in line. So you know that you need to pick up your rondelle and then 2 11-0 seed beads. Always going the same direction. Look for your last rondelle in your last row, skip over it, and pick up the 11-0 seed bead right behind it. And now, right where I'm exiting, there's 3 11-0 seed beads on top. So I know I'm in the proper position. It's right here, 1, 2, 3, right above my thread. I'm going to pick up my big seed bead, or my big crystal, and then 2 11-0 seed beads. I'm going to find my next rondelle in line, which is this one. I'm going to skip over it and pick up the 11-0 behind it, just like this. And pull. Make sure your tension is good, hold it tight. And now I have 3 11-0 seed beads on top of my thread, so I know I'm in the right position. I'm going to pick up a crystal rondelle and 2 11-0s. I'm going to find the next rondelle in the same direction I've been sewing and skip over it and pick up the 11-0 behind it and pull through. I'm going to turn my piece, make sure my tension is nice and tight. I've got 3 11-0s on top of my thread here. Right where my thread's coming out, there will be 3 11-0s on top of it. Then I will pick up a rondelle and 2 11-0s. I will find the next rondelle in line and go into the seed bead behind it and pull. And then again pick up a crystal rondelle and 2 11-0 seed beads. Find the next rondelle in line and go into the 11-0 behind it. And again, pick up your rondelle first and then 2 11-0 seed beads. Always remember the big bead first. And then you're coming out here. You're going to find the next rondelle and go into the 11-0 seed bead behind it. Keep your tension tight and turn. We're just going to do this a couple more times just so you can see what it starts to look like if I get enough established here. So I've got my 3 little 11-0 seed beads on top. So I know that I'm ready to add my rondelle. And so I find the rondelle next in line and pick up the seed bead behind it. And again, I will pick up a rondelle, 2 11-0 seed beads, and find the rondelle next in line and pick up the bead behind it. And this is what your spiral should start looking like. Nice and sparkly. And your little 11-0s or your 11-0s are together and your rondelles are together as it twists around. We're going to do this for about, I'd say that's an inch. Let me measure it real quick. Now you can count the rows, but it can be difficult to count these rows and have it accurate. So what I like to do is I like to measure exactly how long it is. I got my little bead board here. This section is about 1.5 inches, so it's 1.5 inches long. So we're going to do about about 1.5 inches of this size of bead that we're doing right now. Now I will tell you the exact rows when I come back too, so that you know. But we're going to do 1.5 inches. The bracelet that I made earlier is about 7 inches long, 7.5. So that's what I'm going to do today. If you want your bracelet longer, do more of these sections so that you don't have to calculate it in the middle. Just do a longer part of our beginning section. If you want it shorter, do it shorter. Do 1 inch instead of 1.5 inches. So go ahead and continue the stitch I just showed you for about 1.5 inches, and okay, so I have made about 1.5 inches here of my basic Russian spiral with my rondelles and my 11-0s. And the reason I tell you to measure it instead of counting is it can be a little confusing, because as your spiral comes around on your last one, it's not a full row. So, or even on your top one. So you could count like your black rows 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then count this one down here that isn't quite finished as 7. So, here I have 7 basically. It just gets a little confusing, so I'd rather measure it. And when you get to this point, then we are going to increase what we're doing here. So now I am coming out. I have my 3 little beads on top of my thread here, my 3 little 11-0s. I'm coming out here, so I'm ready to put a rondelle and my 2 11-0s. But instead, I am going to now pick up first my biggest bead. I'm going to go to a bicone crystal, and then a rondelle, and then 1 11-0, just like this. Now I'm coming out here. I'm going to go around just as I have been, find my next rondelle, and go into the 11-0 right here behind it. It doesn't change until you've done a complete row here. So make sure your tension is good, turn, and then pick up a bicone, a rondelle, and an 11-0. We're coming out here. We're going to find our next rondelle and go into the bead behind it. And then just put your finger on top as you're pulling through, and just make sure that your tension is good, especially as you do your increase, because you don't want it to get sloppy. And then pick up a bicone crystal, a rondelle, and an 11-0. Find your rondelle, go into the 11-0 behind it. Now here is where it's going to change just a little bit, because we're all the way around. We've done our 3. And we're going to step up over to this bead here now. So we always want to go into our second bead. In this part, our second bead was an 11-0. Our second bead on our row here is now going to be the rondelle. So we'll always look for our biggest bead and go into the bead behind it. Our biggest bead is this bicone. The bead behind it is the rondelle. So we're going to pick up our bicone, a rondelle, and then an 11-0. Now we're going to find our bicone, our biggest bead, go into the bead behind it, this rondelle right here, and we're going to pull it through and tighten it. And then we're going to pick up a bicone crystal, a rondelle, and an 11-0. Find our next bicone since it's our biggest bead, and then go into the bead behind it, this rondelle here. Pull tight. Get myself a little more thread here. And then pull this way, or turn this way. Pick up bicone, rondelle, and 11-0, just like this. Look for your next bicone and go into the rondelle behind it. And again, same thing, it's just very repetitious. We will pick up a bicone, a rondelle, and an 11-0. Get my 11-0 down there. Look for our next bicone crystal because it's our biggest bead, and we will go into the rondelle behind it. And now we have our increase. And you can see that the bicones are starting to lie in a line, and the rondelles will do the same as we get a little bit more here. So we're going to pick up a bicone crystal, a rondelle, and then an 11-0. We look for our next bicone. We're coming out of this rondelle. This is our next bicone. We're going to go into the rondelle behind it. Turn the piece. Then you will pick up bicone, rondelle, always biggest beads first, and go down to the smallest. So bicone, rondelle, and then 11-0. Here's our next bicone crystal. We're going to go into the bead after it, which is the rondelle. And now you can see I have a nice increase. And we're going to continue doing this increase for about, let's see how long I made this one. For about an inch and a half again. So go ahead and do the increase until you have an inch and a half, and we'll be back. Just continue what you're doing here. So I have made my increased section about these kind of stretch and stuff, and this other bracelet I made has a lot looser tension than this one. So I'm making it right about an inch and a half, a little bit short of it, right about there. And each one has a little bit of stretch, so it depends on if you have it together or stretched out how big it is. So I'm going to say right about there is where I'm going to stop. I don't want to go too crazy because then my bracelet will be really long. And now this is where we will start our decrease. So we are going to pick up a rondelle. We're coming out of this little rondelle right here. Let me get a little closer. And we're going to pick up a rondelle and two 11-0s, just like this. Now, we're going to find the next bicone and go into, because it's the biggest bead, and go into the bead after it. So just like we've been doing with our increase, we will go into our rondelles and pull it tight so that it gathers it up like this. And then pick up a rondelle and two 11-0s. Find your next bicone crystal and go into the rondelle behind it. So the bead behind the biggest bead on your last row is the one you'll go into. Now we're going to pick up a rondelle and two 11-0s. Find the bicone and go into the rondelle after it. Now we've gone all the way around. So our biggest bead is now our rondelles. So when we pick up our rondelle and our two 11-0s, we will go into the 11-0 after the next rondelle. So we're going to pick up a rondelle and 2 11-0s. And we will now go into the bead after the biggest bead in our last round. So it will be this rondelle, we'll go into this 11-0. And this will decrease our stitch again. Oops, come here, 11-0. Does not want me to go in there. Pulled it a little tight. There we go. And then I will pick up a rondelle and 2 11-0s. There's my next rondelle. I'll go into the 11-0 after it. Just like this. And then pick up a rondelle, 2 11-0s. And then we will go find the next rondelle on a round and go into the bead after it. And on this one, it looks like there's 2 right there, but this is the next one, so we'll go into the bead after it. And that's just because our decrease makes it a little funny looking on one side. It's like this. Now we'll pick up a rondelle and 2 11-0s and go into the 11-0 after the rondelle. Now we want to do this until we have 3 rondelles in line on each side. And so I'm going to do another row here, and we're going to pick up a rondelle and 2 11-0s. Actually, we want 4 rondelles in line, I believe. So we're going to go around here, and you'll be able to see it start to form the spiral again, and you'll be able to count the beads. So just keep doing the 11-0s and the rondelles. Look for your next rondelle, go into the 11-0 after it. Now, where I started my decrease, you can see, where I started my decrease, you can see I have 3 11-0s right there. Or not 11-0s, rondelles. I want to go around one more time until I have 4 of the rondelles in line on all sides, and then I will begin to increase again. So I'm going to pick up 2 or a rondelle and 2 11-0s, look for my next rondelle in line, and then go into the bead behind it. And again, pick up rondelle, 2 11-0s, and go into the bead behind it. And then one more time, pick up a rondelle and 2 11-0s, and go into the bead behind the next rondelle. So now, if you look at my piece, you will see where I started my decrease. I have 1 2 3 4, 1 2 3 4, 1 2 3 4. So I know now I can start my next increase, which will be my middle section. Now the way we're going to do our next increase for our middle section is we're going to pick up a 4mm round. We're going to call that our biggest bead because the diameter is a little bit different than the bicone, even though they're both 4mm rounds, or 4mm beads. It seems like the round is bigger. So I'm going to pick up the round first, then a bicone, and then an 11-0. I'm going to do my first round with my increase the same as I've been doing. I'm going to find the next big bead, which is the rondelle in the last row. And I'm going to go into the 11-0 behind it, right here. And I'm going to pull my new beads down. And that's my first increase stitch. I'm going to turn it. I'm going to pick up a 4mm round, a bicone crystal, and an 11-0. And then I'm going to find my next rondelle because it's the big bead here in my last row, and I'm going to go into the bead behind it and pull very tightly. And then again, 4mm round, bicone crystal, 11/0 seed bead. Find my next big bead, which is this rondelle, go into the bead behind it. Now we've got our first round done, so of course it's going to change here. We're going to pick up the bead we go into. Now we're considering our 4mm round the biggest bead, so we're going to skip over it and we'll now be going into the bicone crystal as our second biggest bead. So what we're going to do is we're going to pick up a 4mm round, a bicone crystal, and then an 11/0 seed bead. We're going to skip over this 4mm round and we're going to go into the bicone. Just like this. And now we are going to do the same thing again. Round, bicone, 11/0. It's like this. Now we're exiting this bicone here. We're going to skip over our next big bead and we're going to go into the bicone after it. And again, pick up a round, a bicone, and an 11/0. Skip over your biggest bead, which would be this round, and go into the bead after it, which is this bicone. We're going to do this until we have 3 of our bigger beads in a row on each side. So we have 2 in a row on each side right now. So we're going to do this one more time around. So we're going to pick up a round, a bicone, and an 11/0. And then we're going to skip over this round and go into the bead after it, which is the bicone. Pull tight. And then pick up a round, a bicone, and an 11/0. Find your next round, skip over it, and go into the bead after it. And one more time, we are going to pick up a round, a bicone, and an 11/0. We're going to find the next big bead and go into the bead after it. Okay, now we're going to start a decrease again, because right in the middle we're just going to have this kind of section. So what we're going to do here, we're exiting this little bicone here. Let me back off a little bit. Now we're going to go back down to rondelle and to 11/0. So we're going to pick up a rondelle, 2 11/0 seed beads, and we're going to go into the next bicone. So we'll find our blue bead and go into the bead after it, just like we've been doing on our first decrease here. We'll do the same thing. Pick up a rondelle and 2 11/0s. Find the next blue bead or the next big bead. You're probably not using blue like I am, but the next big bead. Go into the bicone behind it. Pull tight. Now this will gather it up, so you want to make sure you have nice tension on this. And then pick up a rondelle and 2 11/0s. And then we are going to find our next blue bead and go into the big bead and go into the bicone behind it. And now we've gone all the way around, so our next bead that we will consider our big bead will be the rondelle here. So what we're going to do is we're going to pick up a rondelle, 2 11/0s. We're going to find the next rondelle in line and we're going to go into the bead after it. And now we're starting our second row of decrease. And we will do that until we have 3 11 O's on each side all the way around. Or not 11 O's, rondelles. Okay, so then we're coming out here. We're going to find our next rondelle. We're going to pick up a rondelle and 2 11 O's and go into the bead after the rondelle. Maybe, if I can get back here. Okay. So, this is what you will have, and I'll close it down. Do this until you have 3 rondelles on each side, and we'll be back. Okay, so now I have done my spiral until I have 3 rondelles all the way around. It kind of, with this much of an increase, it kind of curls in, and that's okay. Just make sure you have 3 all the way around. This one will get back into line when I go around it again. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to increase again right now after my 3 rows here. So I am going to pick up a 4mm round, a bicone crystal, and an 11-0. I'm going to find my next big bead, which is my rondelle. I'm going to go into the 11-0 right after the rondelle, right here, just like I did with my last increase, and pull. Make sure that you pull these beads very tightly so that it pulls everything into line, and then again pick up the 4mm round, the bicone, and then 11-0. Look for your next big bead, which is the rondelle in the last row that you did, and then go into the bead behind it, which is an 11-0. Pull your beads tight, and then again pick up a bicone or a round, a bicone crystal, and an 11-0, like this. Find your next big bead in line from your last row and go into the bead after it, just like this. And now we've gone all the way around once, so we're going to step up and we're going to pick up a round, a bicone, and an 11-0. And we are going to continue going into our next bead after our next big bead. So it will be, our big bead is the round, the next bead is the bicone. And we will do this until we have 3 blue beads on each side, just like we did here. And then so I've done my blue beads, my big blue ones, until I have 3 and on each side in the little rows as they line up here. And now we're going to decrease again, just like we did here. So we are going to pick up a rondelle and 2 11-0s. And since we've been going into our bicones, which are the bead after our biggest bead, which is our round, we will do that again on our first row. So we will go into the bicone behind the next big blue bead. Pick up a rondelle, 2 11-0s, find the next big bead, go into the bead after it, and again, rondelle, 2 11-0s, find the next big bead, go into the bead after it, here, the bicone, and we've gone all the way around. So now our next big beads in our last row will be considered the rondelles. Don't worry about this bicone here. It's in the row before our last one. So we're going to pick up a rondelle, 2 11-0s, find the next rondelle and go into the bead after it. We're going to continue doing this decrease until we have 4 beads in each row, just like we did on this side. So go ahead and do your decrease until you have 4 beads in each row all the way around, lining up the 4 rondelles, that is. Okay, and so I have done my decrease with my rondelles and 11 O's, making sure that each one, 1, 2, 3, 4, as we go around, has 4 rondelles on each side of the spiral. So now I'm going to do this increase here. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to pick up a bicone crystal, will be our biggest now, and then we'll pick up a rondelle, and we'll pick up our 11O, and we will do this stitch down here again. Of course, we have to start going into the 11O behind the next rondelle in our round. So we're coming out here. Our next big bead is the rondelle, so we'll go into the 11O behind the rondelle in the row we did before this one. Now again, pick up a bicone, a rondelle, and an 11O. Find your next big bead in your previous row, that's the rondelle, go into the 11O after it. And again, bicone crystal, rondelle, 11O. Find your next big bead, go into the 11O after it. Now that we've gone all the way around once, start our next row. Our big bead is now the bicone crystal. The bead behind it is now the rondelle. So we'll pick up a bicone crystal, a rondelle, an 11O. Find our next big bead, go into the one after it. So the bicone's the big one, the rondelle's the one after it. So that's the one we will go in for our next rows. And we will continue doing this until we have exactly the same amount as we did on our other side. So you can either measure it 1.5 inches, or you can try to count it, or you can bend it over and lie them next to each other. Just make sure you have the same amount. Continue doing this stitch with your bicone, rondelle, 11O, and going into the rondelle after the bicone crystal until you have the same amount on the other side, and then we'll decrease again. Okay, so I have made my increase on this side of my bracelet the same size as this side by measuring it on my little board, and now I'm ready to do the decrease and do this part on this side. So what I'm going to do is I'm coming out of my last rondelle right here from my last stitch that I did. So now I'm going to start with my decrease by picking up a rondelle and 2 11 O's. Now I'm going to find my next biggest bead, which would be the bicone, and go into the rondelle just as I have been doing on the previous rows, and pull tight. And then I'm going to pick up a rondelle, 2 11 O's, find my next big bead, which is my bicone on my previous row, and go into the bead after it, which is the rondelle. Now, keep the tension nice and tight, and then pick up a rondelle and 2 11 O's. And again, find your big bead, which is the bicone, and go into the bead after it, which is this rondelle. Now, we've gone all the way around, so on this row, we will pick up a rondelle, our 2 11 O's. On the previous row, the big bead is now the rondelle. So we'll find the first rondelle we did and go into the 11O after it. And as we did before, we will just follow suit. Just pick up a rondelle, 2 11 O's, find the big bead. On the previous row, go into the 11O after. You're going to continue doing this decrease until you have the same amount as you do on this side. So you will just continue by picking up your rondelle, your 11 O's, find your next big rondelle in the previous row, and go into the 11 O right here. And again, rondelle and 2 11 O's. Find the next rondelle and go into the 11 O after it. And now I have a whole row, so it's more obvious where my rondelles are and which one I need to go into. I need to pass and go into the bead after. So go ahead and do your decrease like this on this side until you have the same amount. So I have finished my second side, and I just measure it with my first side, make sure that they're the same length, and then we're going to clasp this in. Get a little closer here so you can see what's going on. I'm coming out of the little 3 beads like I would be to add my next rondelle. However, I'm not going to do that. I need to tighten this side up a little bit because as you can see, the side where we started is tighter. So what we're going to do is we're coming out of this 3rd bead. We're not going to pick up any beads. We're just going to go through the rondelle here and pull. And then we're going to just go through 2 of the 11 O's here and go through the next rondelle and pull. And then again 2 of the beads behind the rondelle we're in, and then the next rondelle, and we will pull. Now you don't want it to crumple your work up too badly, so make sure you have good tension on it and it's not all crumpled up. Now I'm coming out of the rondelle. I'm going to pick up 2 11 O's behind it and then just go into the first rondelle I started in and exit it and pull. And pull it tight. And then it's tightened up pretty good. So you can see your 3 rondelles on top here. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up an 11 O seed bead and a 4mm round crystal and an 11 O seed bead. I'm coming out of this rondelle here. I'm going to go directly across in the same side that my thread is coming out of, into the rondelle across from it. And just into the rondelle. Get a little bit closer so you can see better. And then pull. I'm just going to kind of anchor that little round bead on top. Then I'm going to turn my piece. Now this can make your ends get sloppy, so just be really careful how you're doing it. Pick up 1 11 O seed bead. Coming out of the rondelle here, we're going to go into the little 4mm round on top and pull. And now we're coming out of the rondelle, or out of the 4mm round here. We're going to pick up another 11 O and we're going to go down into the rondelle here. And pull. Pull it tight. And now we're coming out of the rondelle here. Just to tighten everything up, we're going to pick up an 11 O and we're going to sew into this rondelle here, the 3rd one on the side that we haven't involved in anything. And we're going to pull it up tight. And then we're going to pick up another 11 O and we are going to go into the rondelle on the side over here that we have our little bead anchored to, and we're going to pull tight. And now we're going to go through 2 11 O seed beads on the other side here. And then up through one of the 11 O's we put on the round here. This is just pulling the 11 O's up around the little bead we've just added so that it doesn't look like there's a bunch of thread around the little round bead. So then I'm just going to go into the 11 O, or actually I'm going to go into the round bead, sorry about that. And then we're going to go into this 11 O here. We're going to go into the 11 O we added on this side to include the other rondelle, pick up another 11 O, and then come into the 11 O next to it here. And all I'm doing is just adding 11 O's all the way around the top. And then I'm going to go into the 11 O that's anchored right to the blue bead too. So I'm going through the two of them, and I'm just going to pull it together. This way, I don't have any thread showing, and it just kind of makes a little bobbly end here. It isn't perfect by any means. One of your little beads sticks out here, there, whatever, but you don't see any thread that way. Now I'm going to come up through my round bead, and I'm going to pick up an 11 O. Then I'm going to pick up, or actually I'm going to pick up two 11 O's. Then I'm going to pick up my clasp, drop it down. I'm going to pick up two more 11 O's, and I'm going to go back through my round bead and pull. And now I'm going to sew back through these beads and the clasp, and through these beads on this side and the round, and pull tight. And go through that and secure it about 3-4 times, and then you can just sew back down into your little 11 O's, and then into your spiral. Grab some thread bridges and tie off. Separate your clasp, and then go over to the other side and do the same thing. Add your little round bead and sew your end of your clasp on. I know it looks confusing, but once you're doing it, you'll see how to do it. There's no specific way. Just make sure that you cover your threads with the little 11 O's as you sew through, and then sew down into your spiral and tie off. And do that with your tail thread on the other side, and we'll be back. So I went ahead and put my clasp on, tied through, and sewed off. Don't worry about doing it precisely as I did it. Just do as I did, covering your thread path with 11 O's. It gets kind of bobbly and cute on the back. It's not precise, it's not perfect, but it's just kind of bobbly and cute. If you have a better way that you like to do it, that's fine too, or you can make a loop and put a jump ring on it, whatever you want to do. I just wanted mine to be kind of seed beady and bobbly, and just that's how I wanted it to look. So it worked out for me. Anyway, this is what it looks like when it's all finished. I hope you enjoyed this project, and I hope you learned how to do Russian spiral, and you make yourself a nice long rope or a bracelet or something pretty from it. Have a good day. Bye.